Hello everybody and welcome to a brand new ESO video. Today we got the new patch notes for test, the 3.0.4, and I will say this, they did some pretty cool changes. I'm not gonna lie. I wish I could have had this video out a lot sooner, but unfortunately I had to re-record the video several times because of complications and stuff. But let's go ahead and get through this real quick. So we're just gonna ignore this top stuff. This top stuff is all for Morrowind anyways, and we're going to get to this stuff. So this is where things got really interesting. Now we know from the live stream they said they upped the damage of light attacks, reduced the damage of heavy attacks, and they're going to increase the restore amount of heavy attacks, how much resources it gives back. Now I know a lot of people are looking at that number going 30% is a lot, but we'll get to that in a second. So first off, they increased the damage of light attacks by 15%. I am going to show you guys on test what it's like with a basic build, not a meta build, just a basic simple play build, because I do think that more non-meta players and people who are trying to strive to get to that meta level need to see this stuff and everything. So they decreased the amount of heavy attacks by 15%, increased light attacks by 15%. This number here, a lot of people are going to be like, oh my god, that's so awesome, it's so great, it's such a great damage increase. 15% is not much, guys, but it is enough to make a difference. So it will make stamina builds really good. Like, this is making stamina builds really good, and it's also making heavy attack, it's not making heavy attack builds so good, it's just making them okay. Now they increase the resource amount. Now this, with Tenacity on a player, because Tenacity now only gives 15% on with Morrowind, you will only be able to get at, we're talking 45% max resource return, which does seem like a lot, but in reality, with the changes to resource management and everything else, it's not enough. It's still gonna it's enough, but it's gonna be not enough for the meta. And trust me, I've already tested it. Okay, reduce the cast time of fully charged bow heavy attacks by 10%. This was something that needed to happen a long time ago, especially now that they've done the change to have bow heavy attacks where it's on an auto fire system. That means you just hold it down and you'll just keep firing heavy attacks instead of holding and locking the bow and back so you can sit there and aim, chase your target with it, kind of thing. They did this change, and it is cool. I like it. I'm glad they did this increase the speed, because it's a little bit faster than the dual or two-handed heavy attack, but not quite as fast as dual wield heavy attack. So it's it's kind of almost in the middle there. Reduce the charge time of fully charged flame and frost heavy attacks. Now I know a lot of people want the lightning staff done and the resto staff, but here's the thing about resto and lightning. Lightning does splash damage. So it hits multiple targets. If their speed gets increased, that means they're going to be doing even more damage. They want to bring the fire staff and the frost staff down to be on par with their heavy attacks, so that way they can actually do something good with them, because they were way too long. And then resto staff gets major mending, and it procs a heal. So the quicker the time, the faster they're doing that. And that's why they're not making that change, I think, is because it would give people too much ease with those abilities to proc those things. And with this, they're not procking those things. They're procking just damage. And the heavy attack from the frost is going to proc the taunt and the damage shield. So this is cool for the frost, especially frost tanking. It can make it a little bit better for those using ice staffs. The flame staff, this is going to be way better for flame DPS. DK Magicka DKs, this is going to make them really OP. And this 15%, guys, remember, it is not as big as you think. You can still proc a heavy attack with a flame staff at 30k. At a heavy attack, if you're using igneous weapons, that increases your molten armaments, which increases your heavy attacks by 40%, you will see a huge increase in your DPS. Fixed an issue where enchantment bonuses were not displaying on items. That's more of a PTS thing. Fixed an issue where summon pets were not being affected by healing reduction from a battle. And that's good, because that was a little OP. I did duel a couple people running pets, and it really sucked because they weren't affected by that battle spirit. But also in the battlegrounds, like this was OP. Like this made pets OP in there. Pets are still kind of OP, and I'll get to the pet thing with the Sorks here in a second when we get down to it. But let's get into the Dragon Knight stuff. So Dragon Knights, this patch got a little bit of a nerf, I'm not going to lie, when it comes to their Battle Roar and their Helping Hands, but it wasn't as big a nerf as a lot of people made it out. In fact, Battle Roar became better, in my opinion, but Helping Hands did get hit pretty bad to a certain degree. Now, if you're playing like what are they? A Red Guard DK, Stamina DK, yeah, you're not, like, you're fine. Don't stress it. But if you're playing like a Magic DK, and you're hoping Helping Hands will give you resources back to give you the ability to block and all that kind of stuff from your heavy attacks and light attack. Your stamina, you're not going to be getting a whole bunch of stamina back. Actually, you will. They will get more back, but that's because they have less. They're below the range. But these changes here, like Fiery Grip, reduce the cost by 7%. A lot of people are, oh, it's not. It's more than enough. Trust me. Inhale, that's perfect. The Spiked Armor, this is the one that gets me, is the Spiked Armor. I play a DK tank. This is going to make my life so much better. I'll be able to keep this up more often, more effectively. I won't have to be dropping, like, I won't be able to, like, I won't have as much resource issues now with my keeping this maintained in my tanking. So this is a really good change. And it does make Magicka DKs a little bit more OP with this. Sorry, it does. It does help out, especially with the Fire Staff changes, and the light and heavy attack changes. This is going to make Magicka DKs pretty cool. And Stam DKs too. So, assassination abilities from the Nightblade, Grim Focus. This is a good change. Now, just so you guys know, this right here, what this means that you can fire multiple Assassin's Will or Assassin's Scourge bow procs from a single cast of this ability and its morphs. When you cast the ability right now on live, it gives you a 20-second window to hit four light attacks to fire off your proc from this ability. Well, in this one, you'll be able to cast it, and then for every 5 light attacks or heavy attacks you do, you'll be able to proc this ability and fire it off. So every 5 attacks, you'll be able to proc it off. PvE, it's going to be a really good change. It does make the Nightblade, Magicka and Stamina both go up in damage. And with the changes to light and heavy attacks, this will make this a great ability for both Magicka, Nightblades and Stamina Nightblades. So I'm really liking this. Merciless Resolve also reduced the duration of the snare ability of Assassin's Will. Bow proc to 3 seconds from 5. Now this might hurt a little bit in PvP because Merciless Resolve was a really popular thing to use to proc that from the snare. So that kind of, that we'll have to see. Sorcerers, Daedric Summoning. So they fixed the Twilight Matriarch. Now I got a little bit more to say about this. So they fixed an issue where this morphs heal ability could be cast through walls. This is a good change, really good change. It helps out in PvP and PvE. Because PvE it helps because you shouldn't be healing through a wall in PvE. That's just exploiting the game. But in PvP, it's exploiting the game even more because you have these people hiding behind walls and casting their heals, and it was really annoying. So this is a good change. Now I want to go into a little bit more stuff here because the devs did say they were making a change to the scamp. It is not going in this patch. It is going in on the patch on the 22nd, along with other changes to siphoning tax, leeching strikes, those kind of things. Those changes are coming in. They're just not this week. They want us to test this stuff right now so we can get a better idea of it. Now, Templar, Nova, they decreased the time it takes for Nova to land. This is a good change. This is great for people using the Nova for damage reduction in PvE and in PvP, to get that good burst hit on the enemy so somebody else can synergize it to hit them with that big blast. This is a good change. I'm glad they're doing it. Next up, this is where the game changes. I'm sorry, this is a game changer. Two-handed ability, Forceful. This passive ability now deals splash damage to 3 targets up from 2. This just put the two-handed really good in a good place. That splash damage alone, the 3 targets instead of 2, just put it up there. But this is where it gets it. And the damage has been increased to 50% from 25%. This is game changer. I mean, two-handed was looked down upon by the meta crowd in PvE. Now it is being looked at hardcore by the meta crowd because they're going to go, wait, this thing does 50% more damage on 3 targets with a light attack? holy, yeah, this is gonna make damage builds, like stamina builds, really good. And this is where stamina builds also get a nice boost, especially for dual wield. Increase the area of effect damage reduction of this ability, Blade Cloak, and its morphs by up to 25% more. So if you are using, and I'll get into the game here in a second to show you guys this, if you're using this ability, you're not only getting 25%, but you can also get another like 10-20% or 10% in lives or in the game. So that's 35% damage reduction right there. Awesome, awesome. And then on top of that, you can even get more because you can increase it by another 10%, making it 45% damage reduction. That is awesome. Sorry, it is. It made stamina builds look good for trials, and I'm glad they did this. Also dungeons, they're still really good in dungeons, and two-handed just exceeded that. So good job, devs, on these changes. So here I am. I'm in test right now, and I want to show you guys the changes that they made. So first off, let's talk about the weapon changes with dual wield and the champion tree. So Blade Cloak, you can see 25% damage reduction, and if you go into the champion points here and you look at sorry, wrong one. You look at Thick Skin, reduces the damage you take from damage over time by and that's at 23 points. So you can get another 25% out of it, but it takes a lot of points to do that. In fact, it takes so many points that it's really not probably going to be worth it in the long run. So we'll just go ahead and I'll just show you guys here. That's 20. You get, I think with 100 points in this, you actually get a lot out of it. So yeah, 25 points there, 25% but 100 points. But you're not going to want to dump 100 points. Trust me, guys, this new update, you're not going to want to do that. I mean, 56 will put you right at 20%, but even 56 points doesn't leave you a lot of playroom. So I think that the sweet spot for this is actually 23, because that gives you 35% damage reduction. Then with Hardy, it gives you another, 10% even to damage over time. So you're getting more out of it this way. So we'll go ahead and now I want to talk about Tenacity, because a lot of people have a big misconception here. So Tenacity with 100 points will only give you 15%. Just so you guys can see, it only gives you 15% now with 100 points. So with the changes to light and heavy attacks in PvP, heavy attacks and heavy armor players in PvP have gotten a major boost now, because they got 15% here if they wanted to, and I really wouldn't do it, to be honest. I wouldn't waste the point. So I'm going to cancel that. And then on top of that, they got another 30%. Well, in heavy armor, just so you guys can see, heavy armor with that and the heavy armor wraith ability, that gives you or not wraith, sorry, rapid mending gives you 25%. So 25 plus 30 is 55%. And then you add on top of that the 10% or 15% even from Tenacity, and you're still, you're looking at what, 70% return of resources. That's a lot. But I want you to think about this. Now think about wearing heavy armor. That's 25% as a healer. Now you're going to get 25% restoring. And then you go in here and you look at Cycle of Life, which is 15% magic return. That is 80. That right there, the 30 and 30. That's 60%. Then you add 25, you add the 35 and 25. That's 55%. You add the extra 35 or 30%. That's 85%. Then you add Tenacity. That's 95% return with a heavy armor healer build. That is beyond insane. That's beyond ridiculous. And I think that that's something that they might want to look at, because it does make the healer, oh my god, it makes healers just super OP. I'm sorry. So let's go on to talking about the two-handed changes some more. Now, splash damage from this weapon has always been light and heavy attacks from the forceful thing down here would do 25% damage to the enemies. Now light attacks have been increased in damage by 15%. Now this thing is going to do extra damage to the enemies. And here's another thing they did not explain in there, and I don't know if it's a bug, but I just want to show you this. I have 64% more damage. Think about that. My light and heavy attacks are going to do 64% more damage to those 3 targets. If I hit an enemy for 7k from a light attack crit, which I can do with this build, I'm going to hit those other ones for 64% of that. That means over half the damage is going to be going to them. That's a lot. 7k, you know, 3.5 plus the 60 plus another, you know, like 14%. You're looking at about 4k damage to extra targets. That's a lot of damage, guys. A lot of damage that the two-hander can do now. And on top of that, the two-hander is the only ability that after a heavy attack you get 10% more damage, and then your wrecking blow empowers you, so that's 20%. So if you do 20% damage with wrecking blow, do a heavy attack, your heavy attack's going to get 20% more damage. And then you add on this from that heavy attack, and you go into another, like Brawler, or you go into the other Cleave ability, that the other Morph that does the ultimate regeneration, and you're going to be able to do, and on top of that, the Bleed from Brawler, or from Cleave, also got an increase of 11% the last patch in damage. And if you look at the damage here, it does 4,024 up front, with almost 7,000 on the back end. Now with dual wield, if I was on dual wield and I was used Blood Craze, it does 2,017 up front, and it does 9,000 damage over time. These two abilities are so on par now, it's not even funny. One just does more damage up front with more damage over time. The other one does more damage up front with less damage over time. But the fact that they share that same damage capability almost is crazy. I mean, they are literally almost perfectly matched in numbers. If you were to add up these two numbers here, total 9,000, 2017, we're looking at about 11,572 damage. About, I mean, that's just rough math. And then you look at this, 6,905 plus 4,024. That's 10,000 something damage. It is literally like marginal differences. Marginal. It is awesome. I'm sorry, but this just, and the fact that dual wield, that the two-handed, the light and heavy attacks got changed like they did is crazy. I also want to show you guys the damage of a or of a heavy attack with a fire staff. I want to show you guys, like, not the damage, but how quick it is now. So a fire staff before used to be pretty long. So it's a little bit quicker now, but not by like such a grand margin, as you can see. It is really good though. So I'm glad that they put that in there. And the fact of how much resources it gives back. So I'm going to go ahead and burn some stamina off. Let me try a different ability here and a different thing. Oh, I have the lightning staff still hooked up. So let me go do this, and we will go put the bow back on that we were using. I was using the Master's Bow because I use Poison Injection, and this thing does 301 extra damage to targets again that are affected by a poison ability, and it adds 1,032 stamina. I was just like, this is so much better than using... Because, I mean, I was looking at the two. This adds weapon damage, but it only adds 161 damage per take from volley. That's nowhere near what this does, because this adds to that volley damage 301 weapon damage, which is greater than the other one, plus it gives you stamina. So it's like, just looking at the tooltips, this is a better enchantment. But let me go ahead and burn through some resources real quick, just so you guys can see. I'm using Rally, so I'm going to just go ahead and burn off, and then I'm going to do a heavy attack so you guys can see. And this is in medium armor. And you can see you're getting a lot back. Now on heavy armor, it's almost double that amount. So it's like a lot. It's way more than you would think. And I think that's really cool. Also the bow, heavy attacks, just so you guys can see, it is a little bit quicker. Would you stop that mouse? So you can see it's a little bit quicker on the damage side. And the damage of it didn't change by a whole lot. Like how much damage you do with the bow, light and heavy attack didn't change by a huge margin. Neither did the light and heavy attacks from dual wield and stuff. But it did change it by about 900 to 15k point damage, depending on where your stamina level is. The higher the stamina, the higher the weapon damage, the more damage you will see. But still, a lot of testing, you guys, a lot of testing that still needs to be done to get definitive numbers. Like I said, I'm using an average player's build. I'm not using a super build. In fact, an average player would not have access to a two-fang jack. They wouldn't have access to this. So I kind of just went for something that I figured, you know, would be close to something that we could get in you know, not just having the best gear, you know, not testing it with the best gear, with the best setup. Because the average player will be lucky to have this kind of stuff. And so this kind of gives, you know, a better idea of the thing. And just like these, you know, they wouldn't have these, but I wanted to get a good test on damage. So I have been tinkering with other weapons and things like that, trying different things. But we don't get, like, basic weapons. We don't get, like, you know, that thing. We have to use set stuff. So it's like, eh. And I have tried with heavy armor. I've tried DPSing in heavy armor. And by the way, about a 2,000 point difference with the build I'm running right now and the other gear set I was running. There was about a 2,000 point difference in damage parsing. But if I pulled off the parse good enough in heavy armor, I actually get it closer to like a 1.5k difference to almost a 1k difference. And I think that that's a good sign that we might actually see, not only in PvP, heavy armor being used, but in PvE as well. Heavy armor could become something that could be used in PvP content, including dungeons and trials. And you got to look at the changes that they made here. Now, light armor and medium armor got some changes to their resource management, which really put them in a weird place. Like the recovery rate, you know, you get 4% per piece of armor equipped, and it goes up, you know, 4%, you know, is still like 20%, and then the same thing here. I mean, I'll show you on medium armor. So you get 20% stamina recovery, and then with the reduced cost, you only get 10%. Now, stamina builds isn't about using necessarily just class abilities. It's about using weapon abilities too, because you get more of a decrease with the weapon abilities because they're stamina based. If you look at the ranger, it reduces the stamina cost of bow abilities by 15%. So that's 25% reduced cost in the bow abilities. And my two-handed, I have 15%. So I get a 25% reduced cost in those abilities, which does come in handy. But a lot of people are looking at minimaxing and stuff like that, which is good. But I do want to point this out. When it comes to heavy armor, if you were to, I can't test it in a controlled environment against a dummy. I can't get the same results as I do fighting an enemy in the outside world. So what I do is I test both builds on a dummy. I take them in the outside world. I fight the same mob. And fortunately enough, I know where there's a good place to fight giants and mammoths. So I go there and I test the build against those giants and mammoths versus the skeleton. And I know the skeleton is going to give me different results. So when I go out there, I'm going to get different results. So and there I have to calculate the health of the mob and how quickly I killed it to kind of determine my DPS per second. And on a target skeleton, they're off by about 1,000 points. In the outside world, they're only off by about maybe 500 to 800 points. So when it comes to that, so it is a lot. The gap's a lot closer, and the reason why is because of this Wraith. Wraith increases your weapon damage by 10 for 5 seconds when you take damage, stacking up 20 times, which gives you 200 extra weapon damage. Well, when you have the buff bar going, you'll see it stacks up really fast. And especially when fighting like a mammoth or fighting multiple mobs, you're getting hit by multiple targets, you build that really fast. So it gives you that extra weapon damage, and you maintain that extra weapon damage for a certain amount of the fight. That extra 200 weapon damage plus other things really can push your DPS in heavy armor to a decent level. Also on top of that, you got to think about this. When you're playing in a dungeon or a trial, when you're fighting a boss, if you're wearing medium armor, these are your resistances. Unless you have, you know, the thing from the Resto Staff Combat Prayer that increases your spell and physical resistance by 1,000 and something. you're only looking at about a 12,000 resistance here. Now 12,000 resistances, the cap on resistances is 32k, they say. That's where the soft cap is, or the soft cap before diminishing returns is. So at 32k, you have 50% block reduction. That means your armor blocks 50% of the damage. At 16% resistances, you block 25% of the damage. You are actually below 25% here, unless you're using a buff like Unstoppable that gives you, you know, that extra 5k. You're not reaching that 25% mark. In heavy armor, you actually sit at this mark. So you actually block 25% of the damage up front, and then you think about your champion points and how you might have them set up. So here I have 10% reduced damage from all physical damage, disease damage, poison damage. Same thing with Flame, Frost, Shock, and Magic. And then over here I have Ironclad, which also reduces my damage I take from direct damage attacks by 10%. Well, that plus Hardy, or even the other one, reduces my damage by 20%. So if they have a 20% increase, I get 20% damage, you know, reduced thing. But we're not talking about PvP, we're talking about PvE. So this is that. Over here, though, you know, if you have Expert Defender, you can get another 10% from light and heavy attacks. Most enemies in the game do light and heavy attacks, which is also direct damage, so you're getting a 30% damage reduction. Then you take that 25% blocking, and you block 30% of the damage up front, or 25% of the damage up front. Then you reduce that damage by 25 or 20%, and you see a greater difference in how much damage you're taking. So it comes in a different way, but you do see the difference when you have about 16k resistances in medium armor, or even in light armor. When the closer you can get to that 16k, the better off you are. So you have to know the game. Like, you need to know the mechanics. And the way damage reduction works, and I've gone over this before, your armor blocks the initial damage, your damage reduction reduces what's ever left over by that amount. If you have no damage reduction, but only resistances, you won't see a difference. And I've done the test myself several times. I've tested with light armor, medium armor, and heavy armor, and then without any resistance, like bonuses there, in damage reduction. And you see a lot of damage. But as soon as you start putting in the damage reduction, you can calculate how much damage reduction, you know, do the math and actually calculate it with the game's numbers, reduce the damage, you take the damage that they do, that it shows, and you divide it by the percentage that you reduce. And that'll should give you the number of what you're actually being hit for. So that way you take off the 10% or the 30% or the 20% from the damage of the ability. Then you take what's that and that total number, and then divide it by the percentage that your armor blocks, and it'll give you the actual real number of what you got hit by in the first place. And that's how you can calculate the damage that an enemy does. So I have done countless tests with this stuff and come up and it does work that way. So when people say, oh, well, your armor and damage reduction reduces the damage by X amount, no, it doesn't. You block so much damage, then the damage reduction kicks in and reduces whatever's left. So when you have resistances, good resistances on your character, and that's what I love about the new champion point system, is the fact that they front-loaded Spell Shield and Medium Armor Expert, and, you know, Medium Armor Focus, Light Armor Focus, and Heavy Armor Focus. They front-loaded those, and with damage reduction and everything else, if you do your points just right, if you're playing a tank, you don't want to put in, you know, you're not going to be putting a lot into Expert Defender. You don't even need to put much into these to get 5%, and that's really all you need is 5%. If you dump the rest into your Spell Shield and medium, you know, like Medium Armor Focus, if you're tanking in medium armor, your resistances just go through the roof. And also the changes to armor in the game. So I do want to show you guys this. I can't show you the armor. I don't know if I can actually even show you the armor itself, but I do want to show you guys this. So they do have some new overland sets and new things coming. So I'm going to go grab, because I'm trying to think of any of these that might give extra damage, like mitigate. Oh, hatchling shell. So hatchling shell, just to show you guys, used to give you 1900 armor extra resistances. Now it gives you 2,548 extra resistances. Now I want you to think about this real quick. Imagine a tank running around in a set of armor with that kind of extra resistances, plus the resistances they can get from the champion points. You can literally push 32k without a buff. Now just imagine that on a DPS. Or on a tank, I mean. Them having that 32k resistances without having to cast their buff to do that, or blocking, now they can use other skills that they wouldn't normally use on their bar because they're not casting that buff as often. They're not having to cast that extra resistances. So that's kind of the thing that I like about these changes. Now we do have one more patch coming in that will change siphoning strikes from the way Warble explained it in the live stream, and I know not everybody trusts Warble, but leeching strikes and siphoning strikes will give you the same amount of health that it does now. The stamina that it gives you now is supposed to be reduced by a little bit, and what you get back in the end after the 20 seconds is supposed to be a bigger number. That's what he explained during the live stream. Both leeching strikes and siphoning strikes are going to get that change, and they haven't really gone too much further into that. Now I do want to talk about another ability that a lot of people don't think about, because everyone who plays the sap tank doesn't think about this. Swallow Soul. This is a really, really powerful ability for somebody playing in medium armor, tanking, or in heavy armor and tanking, because even in heavy armor you get a certain amount of healing effectiveness if you were to look at the skills here in heavy armor. So let's look at the heavy armor skills. Major Mending increases healing received by 8%, okay, when you have 5 pieces equipped. When you add it to that class ability, Siphoning, this will take you up to 16% healing received in heavy armor. This is why this ability works better than using the funnel health, because it's all about it's not about being selfish either. It's about keeping your survivability up as a Magicka Nightblade or a Magicka tank, or even as a sap tank. And this does a really good job of that, because it does give you that, it deals that damage up front, and then it gives you that 25% of the damage done as a heal. Now that 25%, the nice thing about it is you can increase your healing effectiveness also through Blessed, or if you're an Argonian. So you can get a lot more out of this ability, which is really nice. So that's kind of the thing, one of the things I wanted to point out. The other thing I wanted to point out to a lot of people is, remember how I told you guys about the resistance thing? Well, your resistances have a soft cap at 32,000. After 32,000, you get what's called diminished returns on the amount of damage it blocks beyond that point. And there is a cap. When you hit 50,000 resistances, you stop getting any kind of protection. And at 50,000 resistances, you have a 75% damage mitigation. And yes, you can get 75% if you use it two-handed and it's defending and you're wearing completely resisted out gear and you use this. You can push 75% crit. Now I did this because I cheated a little. I actually tried this. I gotta go down here, I gotta find the monster helmets. So in here there's one set that we are missing, and it kind of drives me nuts. So, and actually two, and that is the Lord Warden set, and also the Mighty Chuden set. So there's no way to for me to give you a definitive on this, but if you were to use Mighty Chuden, increase your resistance to the maximum, I mean everything you can push 50,000 resistances with a two-handed. Because it gives you, and Chuden's also getting an update to its resistances. So is any of the other Lord Warden's getting an update to its resistances. So you are going to get some pretty good resistance stuff out of all this. And so this is why I was mentioning at the beginning, and in the very beginning when they released the Morrowind patch, I said we're going to see different kinds of tanks coming out. Now, not on the meta end, you might not see this, but on the average player end, you're going to see resistance tanks, you're going to see block tanks, you're going to see shield tanks, and then on top of that, you might even see a mixture of all three. Somebody playing a resistance block shield tank, where they're running a block, blocking, along with their resistance, increasing their resistances as high as they can, along with using a shield, a damage shield, to help them mitigate damage. That's the most common setup for a lot of people, especially DK tanks. But even Templar tanks and even any of the other tanks will be able to do this and get away with a lot more. So I've been looking at a lot of things. I'm actually going to be changing up my tank build, my main tank build, my Templar tank build that I've been playing for almost a year now with a two-handed. I'm actually changing it to a sword and board. And that's because of the changes coming in. I think that a lot of these changes are going to make a lot more things stand out and be more viable. I think that tanking will not only be a sword and board thing anymore. I think that we're going to see more two-handed tanks and even, you know, and not just two-handed tanks, but also staff tanks. I think we're going to see a lot more of that in the average players area, not in the elite hardcore players that are after the score and after the speed runs and all that kind of stuff, but just the average player who just plays the content and enjoys the game for what it is, an MMO and all that kind of stuff. I do think we're going to see that come in. And also, there's a really cool build I've come up with. I'm going to have to bring it forward, but it's a tank bow build. It doesn't use a bow all the time. It uses a bow on one bar, and then it uses sword and board on the other. But it works out really well because you get a lot of control with it, and you get a lot of other things with it that really helps, especially in dungeons, certain dungeons, like Vaults of Madness, you know, where the enemies are running up the stairs or running down the stairs. You can use this one bow ability, hit them with it, and it'll slow them all down, so you can bring them through those AoEs of your allies a lot better. And this is something that I've been tinkering with for a long time now. This build, but it just hasn't been at that right place. Now with these changes, I can bring it forward and actually make it really viable, even for possibly, and I know a lot of meta players are going to be like, no, you're wrong. Actually, meta play. Because of the fact of how much CC it has and crowd control it has, it adds to the tank's advantages in dungeons and trials. And they have the capabilities to pull off all these abilities even in a trial space. Trust me, guys, I have tested it. It does work, and it is awesome. So, and it does require a stamina race to pull it off really well. In fact, Redguard's really good at it. Imperial's really good at it. Nord is probably the best at this build because of the 9% or the 6% damage reduction they get. So they get extra damage reduction, and they don't need as much into the resistance area then. So they can actually get away with a little bit more. And if you're using the right armor with the right setup and the right gear, hands down, this build, bow tank build, will be awesome. I'm sorry, but it will be. But yeah, that's what I've been doing. Like on test, I haven't been testing for the meta. I've been testing for the average player. And it's because of doing all these tests that I've come up with all these different things, like doing DPS and medium armor and light armor and heavy armor, and you know, not only doing Magicka DPS in light armor, but also in heavy armor. And I found a really cool build for a DK and heavy armor DPS. It works out. In fact, it worked better than I ever imagined. Like almost 100 times better, because I was running 5 pieces of Julianus with 5 pieces of Sun. And this, I'm doing this on live, so I have to cheat to get it to work on live. So it's, and I'm not using any resource management on live, so I'm actually losing a lot more, because on test, you know, we have the cap on our resources, what we get from these. We have like, you know, you can only get 20% stamina, 20% health, 20% magicka. So we're losing. We're going to get this also, which is awesome on the 22nd, that this, you know, once you have 100 points in the green tree, the 100 points in the red tree, and 100 points in the blue tree, you're not getting any more bonus from them when it comes to your resources, like your magicka, stamina, and health, but because you cap. And I think that, like, all the changes they're making, I love a lot of the changes. I really do. Leeching strikes and siphoning strikes, not so much, to be honest. I mean, I do play, have 2 Night Blades, and that kind of affects my stamina build. It doesn't affect my magic build at all because it uses I play a Nightblade healer on live, and she uses a resto staff. I just got a massive increase in my return because now I'm getting 60%, or 70% recovery from wearing light armor. It's like, okay, or not 70. I get 30%. I get 60% from that. And from the light attacks from Resto, or heavy attacks from Resto, 30% from the heavy attacks now. So that's 60% plus another, 10% on top of that. And I think that is something that is going to be cool. I'm going to be happy with that change because I will be able to stick with using the build I have. I just need to make some alterations to it and to make it work better. But yeah, I am. I myself am excited for these changes because I do think that the game needed a change up. I mean, we were getting too powerful with our resources. We were getting too powerful with because of having the increased reduced cost, having such a high reduced cost, and having such a high resource return. It made it easier for us to play through the content, and so dungeons and trials became cakewalks. Or normal and vet dungeons and the hard mode dungeons became cakewalk. Normal trials became easier. Hard trials became a little, vet trials became a little easier. Hard trials, they're still going to be hard, but but it's just it made all that stuff super easy, and we're going to see a shift in time frames for people completing content and stuff. Like the average player's time is going to go from, say, being able to beat the 20-minute mark on hard mode to being, like right at that 20-minute mark. Because I've done it with a 3-man group on hard mode. I've done the speed clear on some dungeons, with 3 people in hard mode. And it's like, wow, that's 3 people in hard mode beating that? I mean, that's crazy. And I've done other speed clears in other dungeons with 4 people and in a lot quicker speed time, without people playing the full meta, like the hardcore meta, but just like playing like with their builds that they have, trying to minimax them to the best they can, and that's what a lot of things too. Like now we're really going to have to look at our minimaxing and how we minimax and how we build our characters and what kind of do we want to use all weapon glyphs here and go with resource recovery set? Do we want to go with this set? Do we want to go with this? And even though the meta itself isn't really going to change much, the rest of it will change for the average player. And I think that and it will change for the meta. I mean, it's going to become more. They're going to have to be more reliant on resources, and they're going to have to be more more careful with their resources. So it is going to affect the meta. But I think the average player, it's going to affect a little bit more because the average player is not going to see a huge difference in their play times because they're getting so much more from everywhere else that it's really just compensation for what they took away. And I think that's really cool that they're doing this. So that's it for this video, guys. I know I went into a lot of different places. I talked about a lot of different things. But I've been testing a lot of different things. I haven't been just focusing on meta builds. I've been focusing on the average player builds, the unique builds that nobody really uses, the unusual gear set mixtures of, like, saying using Netch's Touch and, this mage set. I've been, like, because we're limited here on test. So I've been trying all these weird gear combinations, coming up with these, like pure DPS builds and like a support DPS and all this kind of stuff, and it's really cool. Like the things that you can pull off now is really, really cool, because now that orbs and spear shards share the same cooldown, like if you cast a spear shard and then you throw an orb out, they're on the same cooldown. So if somebody uses a spear shard, there's going to be no use of using the orb because they have to wait for the cooldown to end before they can grab it. So it's like, it's like, okay. So that right there changes up the game. But I've been trying I made a healer and I was trying it out, and you know, Templar healer, and it's just easier just to throw spears. It's not even worth it to throw orbs anymore. I mean, in my opinion, because they share the same cooldown, so you can get more spears out with less resource use than you can casting extra orbs on top of it. Orbs are good though. I like orbs because they have the healing orb, and then they have the mystic orb, which does damage. Both are really good, but I like the healing orb on a Nightblade healer, and on a Sork healer, and on a DK healer. I like the healing orb, but on a Nightblade and a DK. On a Templar, I like the mystic orb on the Templar and on the Sork. And on the Sork especially, because the Sork gets that they don't get 5% extra magic damage towards magic damage. They just get that extra damage. So they, you know, you cast that out, and it's like that mystic orb goes along, and it's just like beating on the stuff. And that's the other thing. Like, I've noticed, like, playing a healer, if you don't build your healer to have some kind of critical, or either full critical heals, or you're going for a critical healer, or you're going for just a healing effectiveness healer. Either way you go, you have to go for a little bit of spell damage in there too, because if you go the healing effective way, you don't get enough crits, and then if you go the other way, you get a lot of crits, and then you get a lot of spell damage. So you can actually, it's kind of good to go right in the middle, like a little bit of you know, good crit, good healing effectiveness, good spell damage, because then you get a mix of stuff for your healer, and it really works better. I mean, I was using an empowered staff with, you know, on my Templar, along with, I didn't use the Mundus stone that gives you the extra healing. I went for the Thief stone to get the extra crit, and then I went for Inner Light, and I went for everything I could to give me the crit, and then I went for one spell damage glyph on my jewelry, and then I was using a set that gave me extra recovery and another thing of spell damage, and then I was using, you know, that there on both parts, using healing staffs on both parts, and it works out really well. Like, especially if you're using a Maelstrom and a Master Staff, amazing. So I was using like this mixed combination. I wasn't just looking at my heals though. I was also looking at for solo play, you know, because a lot of healers do solo play. They don't just focus on dungeons and trials because there's other things in the game to do. And so I was doing all this different stuff, and I found that that was a good setup because it gave me a decent amount of spell damage, about almost 2k when I buffed up, you know, with spell damage with major sorcery. And then it gave me about, you know, it gave me a decent amount of it gave me a really good resource pool. I had a really good resource pool. I had a almost 30k resource, or sorry, 35k resource pool with the build I was going for with the Templar. And then my other stuff was pretty good. So I was going with all this different stuff, and I did adjust a few things, and I tried it in both light and heavy armor, and it doesn't matter either way you go, light or heavy, you're still good. I mean, but yeah, I mean, there's a lot of different things like that's coming in, and it's going to be good. It's going to change things, I think, for the better. In my opinion, I know a lot of people are mad, but you know, to me, when you play the game and you see how it is affecting the game, it's not more of a negative effect. It's more of a balance effect. Like, you can tell there's balance done. You know, like they did do a balance sweep, and they did the right kind of balance sweep. Instead of nerfing everything into the dirt, they actually balanced out things to be better. I know people are going to say, well, but Templar lost major mending. Yeah, they lost major mending and gained minor mending. And people who say that they got more minor mending on the Templar, just so you guys know, you know, they got minor mending. Minor mending is part of the class itself. It's in its passive. But the minor mending, a lot of people kept talking. Other people were like, oh, well, they already had minor mending. No, that was a buff that increased their healing received, not their outgoing healing, their healing received. So they do have a way of getting good healing received, but they don't have a way of getting good healing output as well as they used to. That's where the Resto Staff really comes into play now because of major mending on this. You know, and it is 3 seconds. So a lot of people, every class has this 3-second window, including the Warden. And the Warden, you know, it's good class. I'm not gonna lie, it's a good class, like well balanced class, but it's not like it really isn't on par with any of the others. Like it's a good tank, it's a good healer, it's a good DPS. You know, it's just good. And I like that it's like that, because it does bring a lot more stuff. It brings a lot more utility than any other class, to where it doesn't have to rely on using other things, other sources to get benefits and to give benefits. So it's really kind of cool, and I'm glad that they put a class in like that, because the class really reminds me of like a bard from old D&D days, where you would have to train up to be a warrior for so long, then a thief for so long, and then you know, this for so long. And the fact that the Warden is about, they even stated it's about the way that they channel the story. They channel a story to make those things appear. So they are, that kind of aspect is really cool to me. But unfortunately, this video is going to be way too long if I don't shut up now. So I'm going to go ahead and call it quits, guys. I do want to say one last thing, though. To all the people that think that the game's coming to an end, it's not. The game's growing. The game's changing. All MMOs do this. And the only one that ever got hit really bad with a major change was Star Wars Galaxies. Star Wars Galaxies, it would have been like taking this game and making all of our classes restricted. Like, okay, you want to be a TK, you can only be a tank. If you want to be a Templar, you can only be a healer. If you want to be a Nightblade, you can only be Stamina DPS. If you want to be a Sork, you can only be Magicka DPS. It would have been like them doing that. And if they did that to this game, yes, it would be destroyed in a heartbeat. This game would just be poop, and nobody would want to play it, because you would be streamlined. And I don't want to see the game go in a streamlined direction. So anytime they make a change that doesn't go streamlining, I'm happy. And I'll leave it at that. So let's leave it at that, and let's go ahead and close out this video. So I do want to thank everyone who's here, who sat through this and watched this. If you guys enjoyed this video, there is a like button down there in the bottom right hand corner. It'd be greatly appreciated if you guys could hit it. And if not, you can hit that subscribe button and see more videos that I post. And when I post my videos, you'll be notified. Other than that, I want to thank you all for watching. Until next time, have a wonderful day, and I will see you all later. Bye.